Welcome back. In this video I want to do a reveal reverse order, I guess. This is a bit of a backwards reveal because this one's in pieces, and some of you may recognise it instantly, most of you probably won't. To understand this set, we need to go back to the early years of the war and a factory in Wellington that I know and love, Radio Corporation of New Zealand. And in that time they made a Model 12, which they continued as long as they could until they were shut down with war production. In 1945 they continued with the Model 12A, which was a very slight redesign, and I think all that 12A redesign was about was a different tuning gang. This is not a Model 12, but it is stunningly similar on a number of levels. So this is the model AEWS2, and there was an AEWS1, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But so this set, as far as I can tell, was designed by Radio Corporation of New Zealand and produced by various factories. I believe Sheffield and Auckland made them, probably Collier and Beale as well, and my reasoning for that is a couple that I have seen pictures of have these valve shields which are remarkably similar to Collier and Beale ones. Now, having said that, Collier and Beale may have just been contracted to provide the shields. During the war, the idea that you designed something did not mean that you got to build it, and probably didn't mean that you got to provide all the parts for it as well. So there was a department of the government that was specifically tasked with organising manufacturing for the war effort, and most factories made all kinds of different things. Radio Corp made Sten guns, they made press steel helmets, they made stuff which was classified at the time around radar. They did all kinds of stuff. Now this, for all the world, looks like a Radio Corp design. It looks like a slight variation of the Model 12 with a few weird differences, but it was distributed as an AEW2, and it's thought to be a comfort set, a canteen radio designed to keep the troops amused in their downtime. But the fact that it was distributed by the Army Education Welfare Service could also mean that they were designed to teach servicemen a trade, teach them about radio, so that when they came out of the war at the other end, they had a valuable skill set that they could market themselves and find jobs in civilian life again. Now, whether or not these radios were designed to be pulled apart and tinkered with, I don't know. I'm sure a few of them at least were. The ones I've seen have a 110 volt transformer, so they were probably designed for overseas theatres, possibly Japan, where the AC voltage was 100 volts. Possibly America. These were, I believe, distributed to American troops as well. And in fact, until I got this set, the only two I had seen were in America, or at least one was in America and one Canada. But whether the Canadian one went to Canada or whether it came from America, I do not know. So it's a 5-valve set. It's very simple, basic design, very solid. The Model 12 is a great wee set. This I haven't had working. I basically got it, pulled it apart to have a look at it, and then started doing a wee bit more research around it. I never actually thought I'd get my hands on one of these. I thought they were very, very few and far between and overseas. And this one, technically, not an AEW2. It is, but it isn't. And it's got some subtle differences to the actual militarized ones I've seen. This looks like it was probably army surplus from after the war, when there was a bunch that had been made that were no longer required by the military. It's got a different dial on it compared with the AEW2 dial, and also compared with the Model 12 dial. The dial on this one is a little bit odd. You notice the AEW2 dial actually has a full broadcast range that goes beyond the normal broadcast band, up to probably about 1850 or 1900 kilohertz, so it starts into that HF shortwave band. I've also got this, which I stumbled across at one of my club meetings, which is an oddity. It was in a bunch of dials, and I looked at it and thought, holy crap, that looks like an AEW2 dial. It's not drilled, so you can see there's no holes for these two controls here. It is the right size, it is the right shape, it's got a dial light on the top, which is odd. And these may have been made, so what I suspect happened was there was a bunch of these flooded into the army surplus market just after the war, and companies would have bought them and then created their own dial for them to make them their own. So I suspect that these dials were made to go on these sets, and maybe they ran out of sets, or they didn't sell well, or for whatever reason this doesn't look like it's ever been used. So the brand is New World. I've never heard of that. I don't know who sold them. It does have some other markings down the bottom, but they're not entirely clear. But this is a really interesting dial to me, and it's actually a slightly nicer dial than this one, which is very basic and a bit sun faded. So I'm not sure whether I'll keep this dial with it, or whether I'll maybe drill this one out, fit this dial to it. If I use this one, which is very much in line with how the AEW2 dials looked and the frequency range, you can see this one goes right up to 1800, I would have to change the tuning gang, because this tuning gang in this one is not the same as the militarized ones I've seen, and it's backwards, so we're 550 here and 1500 over here, so this is set up for broadcast band, and the tuning gang is not the same. Now, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know whether they fitted their own tuning gang so that they could get just a standard broadcast band, or whether they bought some unfinished units and actually fitted a tuning gang that they could get. Whatever the story is, this would require some pretty significant changes to make this dial work on it, and I probably won't. So that's just an interesting oddity which I'm going to hang on to in case I come across another one of these. And it goes in the case, which you can see sitting off to the side here. This has been given multiple coats of paint. This dial's no good, but I'll probably make a new one. Sorry, the dial glass. This is a standard AEW2 case, and even the case bears some startling resemblances to the Model 12. So it's almost like they wanted to keep that Model 12 look to it. Maybe whoever was in charge of marketing at the time thought, let's just make this a Model 12 but militarized. So you can see this rib, pressed steel rib in the center of the grill, and you compare that to a Model 12. Everything's remarkably similar. The dials, there's an on-off switch here, which is the real difference in terms of the control layout. So that's it. We've got louvers on either side, steel base with rubber feet. Rubber feet are a wee bit hard, but they're not bad given how they normally end up when you get rubber feet on something this old. The grill is just a piece of very light custom wood with a bit of cloth over it. I don't know if that cloth is original. It certainly looks fairly old, and it's got green overspray on it. Green is the paint under the black, so who knows, possibly could be. And you can see the louvered rear panel is in appalling shape as well. So that's my AEW2, and I thought that's really cool. I've got one. It's not a genuine AEW2, it's army surplus. I don't know whether it's been modified. I don't know what colour this originally was. It should have been a grey crinkle paint or ripple paint finish, and I'll probably repaint it because this paint scheme is doing nothing for me at all. A wee bit of panel beating on the louvers just to get them back out where they should be. So look for that in an upcoming video. But now these had a broad arrow on them, and I didn't know much about the broad arrow. I know a little bit now. This one does not have broad arrow markings on it anywhere. The broad arrow, I suspect, was put on as part of its acceptance for military life. and there's no broad arrow marking on this anywhere that I've been able to find, but on the military versions they do have the broad arrow. Some people have said that the New Zealand broad arrow has the letters NZ on it, but I haven't seen a broad arrow with NZ on it on any of these sets that I've seen. So there you go. There's your standard AEW2 or Columbus Model 12 in khaki pants. Now the AEW2 implies there was an AEW1, and that's a set I never thought I'd see in real life. There's a reasonably well-known picture on Flickr from a Flickr user that I have conversed with briefly, and he's allowed me to use the picture as long as I credit it, which I'm more than happy to do. He took this picture, I believe, in an abandoned building. I don't know where. He didn't mention it, and I did ask, but again he didn't mention it, and I suspect he's protecting his sources there, which I am fine with. And it's a really good picture. It's high res, it's as detailed as you could want, and I'm really happy to actually have that picture for the archives, and so that we know that an AEW1 existed and this is what it looked like. Again, this is said to be a RadioCorp set, and I don't have any evidence to confirm that. I have hearsay that a RadioCorp employee told a guy many years ago that they were designed supposedly by RadioCorp. It stands to reason if they did the AEW2, they may have done the AEW1, and we know from documentation from RadioCorp's factory that they were at least assembling them and packaging them. It doesn't, to me, look like a RadioCorp set. It doesn't look physically like one. The documentation doesn't look like RadioCorp documentation. The schematic doesn't look like a RadioCorp schematic. That doesn't mean anything. That could have been done by the military, but I'm not convinced that this was actually developed by RadioCorp, but they certainly made them, and they certainly packaged them and packaged spares kits for them. So they may have been involved in it. I just don't know. I never thought I'd see one, and then this arrived. Now I haven't opened this. I've taken some of the labels off to protect the guilty, but
come, dear Jane, now let's get together.
And don't you love that nice summer weather?
So let's go to that beautiful sea.
I'll follow along. It's you for me.
so here it is. The AEW1. 4-band set. Yeah, 3 shortwave bands, broadcast band through to just over 1700, so again, just slightly higher than the typical broadcast band of the time. These do not have an internal speaker, they use an external speaker. It looked a bit of a floral design to it. They came with a spares kit, which included the aerial and earth spike and speaker and wires and what have you. This is not in the world's greatest condition, but given how rare these sets probably are, I don't care. I've got one. Doesn't have the case. It's not complete. The vibrator assembly is missing. Somebody's hacked together something here. I don't know what this is. A giant capacitor of some sort. This is going to be a lot of work, and some work that I'm not probably capable of doing myself. This is the power cord. That almost to me looks like mains cord, rubber mains cord. You've got a giant Mazda valve in there. What is that? A 20P1 Mazda valve. I don't know what that is. It's got a it's an octal base, but it's got the key missing. It's broken off. Oh, key's still in the socket. We've got sectioned off aerial RF and oscillator. There's not much else under here. A lot of the construction appears to be down this back wall. We've got this, what looks to be, to me, for all the world to be a standard power switch from back in the day. A phono socket here, which would have been for plugging the speaker in, although I thought, no, speaker strakes are up here, so, but they've been disconnected, so it's been set up to have a standard phono plug plugged into it instead. So, yeah, look, I'm stoked with this. Serial number 12105. So, I've got one. I'm stoked. I'm really happy. It's not complete. There's going to be quite a bit of metalwork involved in making a new case for it. The vibrator pack is completely gone, so I have to remake that. But I don't care. I've got one. Behold the majesty, which is the AEW1. Very excited just to have one and to be able to document it, if nothing else. If I never get around to restoring it, at least I can document what I've got, get some measurements and some design notes, and maybe actually zero in on who designed this. The valve shields don't look Radiocorp. The IF coils might, maybe. I'll know better once I take the lid off and actually have a look, because Radiocorp numbered theirs, so 6301 and 6302 were, I think, first and second IF standard designs for around that time. But I do have a list of IF cans used in sets around that time from Radiocorp, so if the numbers start with an R, 4-digit numbers starting with an R, that would indicate Radiocorp at least provided those parts. And yeah, so at some point in the future, I'm going to I'm going to jump into this and see if we can at least make it go. Yeah, so I look forward to that coming up in a video at some point, both the AEW2 and the AEW1. I'm really looking forward to at least making this go, if not fully restoring it.